My name is Savannah, and the moment I walked into my townhouse, the silence hit me harder than a scream. The silence in the townhouse wasn't peaceful. It was wrong. Usually, Barnaby's claws clicking on the hardwood is the first sound I hear. Today, nothing. I walked into the kitchen. My mother, Stephanie, was standing by the island, casually dabbing expensive moisturizer onto her wrist. She didn't even look up when I asked where he was. "We sold him," she said. "A breeder offered $2,000 cash. Jessica needs a luxury spa weekend to reset. She's stressed. You'll get over it." In that second, the world stopped. She had traded the only living thing I loved for a massage. Wait. Before I tell you what I did, drop a comment and tell me, what is the one line your family crossed that you can never forgive? I read every single one. Most people would have screamed. They would have thrown the jar of moisturizer against the wall or begged for the contact information of the breeder. But I didn't do any of that. I stood there for exactly 3 seconds, watching my mother hum a little tune as she rubbed the cream into her skin, completely unbothered by the hole she had just ripped in my universe. In that moment, something inside me didn't break. It calcified. I turned around and walked out of the kitchen. My steps were steady on the hardwood floor, the same floor where Barnaby used to dance when I came home. I walked past his empty crate in the hallway, and for a split second, the grief tried to knock the wind out of me, but I shoved it down. I pushed it into a cold, dark box in the back of my mind. I had work to do. I walked into my bedroom and locked the door. The click of the lock was the first boundary I had set in years. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I am an accountant. I don't deal in drama. I deal in ledgers, balances, and audits. If my family wanted to treat our relationship like a transaction, I would audit the books. I logged into the bank portal for the family joint account. It was the account Stephanie had convinced me to open 2 years ago, claiming it was easier for managing household expenses. In reality, it was a bucket with a hole in the bottom, and I was the only one pouring water into it. The screen loaded, and the numbers glared back at me. I scanned the recent activity. There it was. Pending at the top of the list, Golden Petals, Luxury Spa. Deposit, $500. They hadn't even waited for the cash from the breeder to clear before spending it. They had pre-spent the blood money. I scrolled down. Restaurants, boutiques, a charge for Jessica's therapy, retail therapy session. My contributions were the only green numbers on a screen bleeding red. I looked at the total available balance, $24,500. It was money I had aggressively saved over the last 2 years, intended for a down payment on a bigger house for all of us. A house with a yard for Barnaby. The irony tasted like ash in my mouth. They sold the dog to pay for a weekend of pampering, assuming the safety net I built would always be there to catch them when they fell. They thought I was a permanent fixture, an endless resource they could tap whenever they felt entitled to something new. I opened a second tab and logged into a private, high-yield savings account I had opened 10 minutes ago on my phone. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about the mortgage due next week, or the electric bill, or the groceries. I typed in the transfer amount, $24,500. I left exactly $0.00. My finger hovered over the mouse. My mother was downstairs, probably texting Jessica about which facial treatment to get. Thinking she had won. She thought she had asserted dominance by taking the one thing I loved. She had no idea that she had just severed the artery that kept this family alive. I pressed the button. The click of the mouse sounded louder than a gunshot in the quiet room. Transfer complete. The balance on the joint account blinked to 0. I sat back in my chair. The glow of the screen illuminating the empty space where my dog used to sleep. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. For the first time in my life, the ledger was balanced. Darkness fell outside. But I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the blue glow of my laptop screen, scrolling back through 5 years of transaction history. It was a digital graveyard of my own stupidity. I saw the pattern now, clear as day. It wasn't just a joint account. It was a tax system where I was the only citizen paying dues. I paid the rent. I paid the electric bill. I paid for the groceries that filled the fridge I barely opened. And then there were the other charges. The golden child tax. I called it in my head. Designer handbags for Jessica. Concert tickets. A networking dinner that cost $300. My mother and father didn't just favor Jessica. They subsidized her existence with my labor. They had built a shrine to her potential using the bricks of my hard work. I was the foundation, buried in the dirt, unseen and unthanked, while she was the spire catching the light. I closed my eyes, and Barnaby's face floated behind my eyelids. That little French bulldog wasn't just a pet. In a house where affection was a currency I could never earn enough of, Barnaby was the only living thing that loved me for free. He didn't care if I got a promotion or if I paid the bills. He just wanted to be near me. He was the one warm, beating heart in a cold, transactional world. And that's why they sold him. For a long time, I thought my mother lacked empathy. But sitting there in the dark, I realized I was wrong. It wasn't that she couldn't feel. It was that she couldn't see. To a narcissist, other living beings aren't people or souls. They are mirrors. When my mother looked at Jessica, she saw a reflection of the glamorous, a successful woman she wanted to be. When she looked at me, she saw a utility, a toaster or a wallet. And when she looked at Barnaby, she didn't see a creature with feelings. She saw a $2,000 asset that was taking up space. They didn't hate the dog. They simply loved themselves so much that nothing else could exist. Selling him to fund a spa weekend wasn't an act of cruelty in their minds. It was an act of resource management. They traded a prop they didn't need for an experience that would polish their reflection. They sacrificed my heart to feed their ego. And they slept soundly doing it. That realization hit me harder than the anger. They would never change. They would never wake up one day and realize they had hurt me. Because in their story, I don't have feelings to hurt. I am just a supporting character who malfunctioned. I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. My phone lay silent on the desk, face down. I knew that when the sun came up, the war would truly begin. They would wake up, expect the world to be as it always was, and find it changed. I wasn't the daughter who kept the lights on anymore. I was the one who had just cut the power. I closed my laptop. I didn't sleep, but I didn't cry either. I waited for the morning. I woke up to the smell of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. The motel room was cheap, the kind with thin walls and carpet that felt sticky even when it was dry. It was a far cry from the townhouse. But for the first time in years, I breathed easy. The air didn't feel heavy with expectation. Then I looked at my phone. It was glowing on the nightstand, vibrating so hard it was slowly walking across the wood. 47 missed calls, 82 text messages. The notifications were stacking up like a digital car crash. I didn't feel panic. I felt a strange, detached curiosity, like a scientist observing bacteria under a microscope. I picked it up and unlocked the screen. The first text was from my mother. Sent at 8:30 in the morning. Card declined. Fix it immediately. Then came the escalation. 10 minutes later, we are at the front desk. People are staring. Savannah. Pick up the phone. 20 minutes later. You are humiliating us. Jessica is crying. How could you be so selfish? I opened the banking app just to check. Sure enough, there were 3 attempted charges from the Golden Petals Luxury Spa. Declined. 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 They had tried to run the card for $2,000. $500. Then $1,000. Then $500. They were desperate to salvage even a fraction of their pampering. They were bargaining with a machine that I had already unplugged. I tapped on a voice note from Jessica. Her voice screeched through the tiny speaker, high-pitched and trembling with rage. You little witch, do you know who is standing in line behind us? The mayor's wife. We look like paupers. Put the money back right now. I need this. My mental health is hanging by a thread. And you are cutting it. I replayed it. I need this. Not a word about Barnaby. Not a single question about where I was or if I was okay. She didn't care that I was gone. She cared that the wallet had walked away. Then came the text from Stephanie. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. Savannah. I know you're upset about the dog, but this is extreme. Barnaby was just an animal. Jessica is your sister. She is flesh and blood. You are choosing a pet over your family's dignity. If you don't transfer the funds in the next 5 minutes, don't bother coming home. Just an animal. I stared at those words until they blurred. To them, Barnaby was a depreciating asset they had liquidated. To me, he was the only reason I rushed home from work. He was the only one who didn't look at me and see a dollar sign. Finally, there was a voicemail from my father. Jeffrey. His voice was low, attempting to sound authoritative. The voice of the man of the house. Savannah. This is your father. I don't know what game you're playing, but taking that money is theft. That is family property. If that money isn't back in the account by noon, I am calling the police. I will file charges. Don't test me. He was threatening to arrest his own daughter because he couldn't pay for a facial. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, the springs creaking beneath me. A laugh bubbled up in my throat. Dry and sharp. They were threatening me with the police. They were talking about theft. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Jeffrey thought the money belonged to the family because I had put it there. He thought he owned the fruit of my labor simply because he had planted himself at the head of the table. They truly believed they were the victims here. They believed that being denied a luxury weekend was a tragedy comparable to losing a family member. Their narcissism was a fortress, impenetrable by logic or shame. I stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the dusty curtain to look out at the parking lot. They wanted a war. Fine. But they had made a critical error. They assumed I was hiding because I was afraid. They didn't realize I wasn't hiding. I was regrouping. And Jeffrey's threat about the police, that was the invitation I needed. If he wanted to bring the law into this, I would be more than happy to oblige. I had a meeting to get to. I drove to a diner on the edge of town. The kind of place with vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like battery acid. It was neutral ground. Aunt Susan was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking like a judge, waiting for the bailiff to call order. Susan is my father's sister, but she's nothing like him. She's a retired forensic auditor. She doesn't speak in feelings, she speaks in facts. When I sat down, I expected a lecture. I expected her to tell me to be the bigger person, to return the money, to stop causing a scene. But she didn't say a word. She just reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a thick red file folder. She slid it across the sticky table. "I was wondering when you would finally wake up," she said, her voice dry. "Open it." My hands shook as I flipped the cover. I expected to see old family photos or maybe a copy of the deed to the townhouse. Instead, I was looking at a credit report. My credit report. But it was wrong. I scanned the pages. There were accounts listed here that I had never opened. A high-interest store card for a luxury boutique. A travel rewards card, maxed out on airline tickets. An online gambling account linked to a credit line. The dates went back 3 years. The total outstanding debt was staggering $15,000. "I didn't open these," I whispered, my face draining. "Susan, I've never shopped here." "I know. Turn the page." The next sheet was a credit card application with a forged signature, my name, but written in Stephanie's handwriting. The truth hit me like a strike. This wasn't just manipulation. This was identity theft. While I scraped by, saving for a house, my parents were opening cards in my name to buy Jessica designer clothes and cover Jeffrey's gambling. "How did you get this?" I asked. "I audit the family books," Susan said. "Jeffrey begged me for a loan. I checked the numbers. Saw payments going to cards under your name. Made copies. And threw him out." She looked at me. "I didn't tell you because you weren't ready. But now, you're ready to burn it down." Staring at the forged signature, something inside me broke. This wasn't parenting. It was predation. I closed the folder. "What do I do?" "You treat it like the felony it is," she said. I stood. Cold resolve settling in. "I'm going to the police." Susan nodded. "Good girl. And don't let them see you cry." I drove to the townhouse one last time. They were waiting. Angry and demanding, I returned their money. I said nothing. I placed the red file and a fresh police report on the table. "That's a felony identity theft case," I said. I gave detectives everything: documents, signatures, bank statements. It's indisputable. "You called the police on your own parents," Stephanie gasped. "You didn't raise me," I said. "You groomed me to be your ATM." They fell apart begging, panicking, not out of love, but because their source of supply was gone. Their fear was the fear of consequences. "I can't drop the charges." I lied. "It's out of my hands." I walked to the door. "Where are you going?" Stephanie cried. "I was your retirement plan," I said, and I just quit. I left without looking back. 3 months later, in my tiny new apartment, I learned the townhouse had been sold in a distress sale. My parents pled guilty and got probation and restitution. Jessica was working retail. Their empire collapsed the moment I stopped holding it up. But I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about Barnaby. Finally home, after weeks of tracking him down and buying him back in cash from the man they dumped him with. When I picked him up, he didn't bark. He just pressed his head against me like he'd been holding his breath for months. Sitting on the floor with him beside me, I realized my parents had worshipped the having status. Image. Luxury. But they were empty. I had almost nothing now. Yet for the first time, I was simply being safe, free, and loved in a way no one could steal. The silence felt peaceful. A debt finally paid. And if you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, share this story. Sometimes the empty chair at the table is victory, not loss.